Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Lawyers Podcast. We have the pleasure of interviewing today the one, the only Sunny Hostin. How are you? Thank you for
I'm
joining.
well. Thank you for having me.
You really need a little introduction because you're already on The View. You're such a huge presence. You were obviously you were a practicing attorney before. We're so happy that you have decided to join us. You have a lot of fans that are looking forward to this interview and learning more about you. I always joke, even with my mom, I'm like, I'm not going to really ask questions that I can Google. Like, everybody can do a basic Google search. Like, I want to know a little bit more about the journey of why the person is who they are. So we appreciate
Okay.
you doing this type of interview with us today. So first up, who were you before you even became this lawyer, this host? I mean, prior to law school, like, who are you? Who were you before all of this?
It's an interesting question. I'm pretty much the same person, right? I was always someone who was very social justice, a social justice advocate. I was always someone that was sort of hyper aware of my surroundings because I grew up in the South Bronx projects with parents that were activists. So even before law school, I was someone that you know spoke up and spoke out probably more than some of my teachers would have wanted me to. Um, but there's always been this bent inside of me, and I actually see it in my daughter, which is very interesting, that I wanted to make the world a better place, which sounds really cliche, but I really wanted to have impact. And I didn't know how to channel that, right? I didn't know what that was going to be. I had a minor in theater in college. I was a communications major, but before then, I was a biology major. And I remember when Magic Johnson was diagnosed with HIV, I immediately bought an MCAT book because I thought, okay, I need to take the MCATs and go to medical school and figure out a
Wow.
cure for HIV. So there's always been this weird driver for me, this fuel of how do I do something that can change the trajectory of our country, and where is the deep need. But what I've learned is that you have to not only identify the deep need, you have to do it in a way that is deeply joyful for you. So if you meet the deep joy with the deep need, then that's when you're really walking in your purpose. And so I realize now that even after going to law school, which I loved, bizarrely, even after being a federal prosecutor, which is probably the best job I'll ever have, right? I kind of felt like I was just doing the good work and having a real impact in people's lives. I think doing what I do now as a journalist, because I was a journalism major, communications major, I have finally sort of found deep joy where there's a deep need in this country. And the deep need is for people to be truthful. And the deep need is for people to be factual. And for the African American community in particular, I mean, when you think about it, we are incarcerated at a higher rate than any other demographic, yet we consume media at a higher rate than any other demographic. And so I think I have finally sort of found that sweet spot for myself where I have been able to um, find deep joy in giving a voice to these struggles in the community, to the excellence in the community, and then also to sort of the need that people, um, the need that I see in our community for representation and having a voice.
Well, you did not quite pick up the MCAT book. You picked up the LSAT book.
I
So
bought them both. I bought them both, believe it or not.
ultimately you decided to go to the other side, right? And I do
I
think the
did.
legal and medical community, we are companion professions in terms of helping the
Yes.
community just in different ways. But you decided to go down this path of
Hmm.
law school. Was there something that kind of like while you were studying, you realized, well, maybe doing it in in the capacity of a lawyer versus maybe a doctor, I can help my community more?
Yeah.
Was there like something that happened that said maybe I should just do law school?
Yeah, no, it was my mother. I will tell you, I graduated from college and I
Uh,
spent a year interning for new ABC News, actually, for Carol Jenkins at the time. I also spent some time as an extra on like Jungle Fever with Spike Lee. I spent some time working as a paralegal for an organization called gosh, what was it? It was sort of an adjunct to the Innocence Project. It was training for lawyers, defense lawyers that were um, defending drug cases.
mhm.
And when all of I think my mother got scared. I'm an only child, and the the first person to like really, I think, in our family be seen as a possibility of success and a
Mhm,
possibility of excellence.
mhm.
And she kind of sat me down and she was like, wow, this whole acting thing, or this, because she thought she saw broadcast journalism as acting. She's like,
Oh,
this
I
whole
see.
TV situation of the acting and the TV and that kind of thing, it chews you up and spits you out. She wasn't wrong about that.
Mhm.
She said, you're too smart to throw it away and to have to become dependent on anyone. You love to argue. My her dream was to be a lawyer, and she's
Oh,
like,
I
but
see.
I had a baby, and so I became a teacher instead. And she was like, please just at least try law school. And that was kind of our deal. It was like, try it for a year, and if you hate it, then find joy somewhere else. And I don't know, my first year, it was like I just kept on thinking, this is good. I like this. Like,
Mhm.
I was amjuring evidence and criminal law, and I was just, I felt alive, and I felt like it was really important to understand your rights in this community, and how I could probably share that knowledge. And I stayed. And then before I knew it, I was clerking for a judge, and I was working at a law firm, and then I was at the Justice Department. So it took off for me. So, they always say your mom wants the best for you, your parents want the
Mhm,
best for you, and they see things in you that you don't even see in yourself.
mhm.
I could not have imagined the success I had as an attorney um, without my mom. Like she was sort of that driver. She saw that in me before I saw it in myself.
Well, shout out to mom because you did become this amazing attorney, but you still ended up right back on TV and you're so successful with TV. I wonder what she thinks about how it's still like a full circle moment for you that you still kind of went down this path
Yeah.
that she wanted to go down, but you were still able to kind of bring your two worlds together. I similarly had, a father that wanted to be a lawyer. So that was part of what was kind of whispered in my
Yes.
ear as a young child. So I kind of always knew I wanted to be a lawyer because he wanted to be a lawyer. Um,
Yes.
and so, and even now my mom is like, why are you doing all this other stuff? This podcast, all that, just go sit in a regular office. And it's not that I haven't done that, but she's just like, why do you want to do all this other stuff? And I'm like, well, because it allows me to bring both worlds together. The Black Lawyers podcast
That's
allows me to bring the world of the law and media and journalism and advocacy allows me to do it together. So I think when you have old school parents, and again, they just want you to do what's safe. I can relate to my mom being scared and like
and
why
well, I have a 21-year-old and an 18-year-old, and she's about to go to college, and he's in his third year at Harvard. I'm terrified. I'm terrified because they want very untraditional careers, non-traditional careers rather. But I do think that there is this wonderful space that I've been pretty lucky to find, in that even while I was practicing, there was just this bug. And some people call it the act, some people have the acting bug, some people have the music bug. I had the journalism bug. I've been journaling since I was 12, writing short stories. I would i watched 60 Minutes on CBS like every single Sunday. Of course, during the Oprah years, that was like sort of appointment television for me. And I just always had that bug. And
Mhm.
I've been really fortunate to be able to use my law degree and my journalism degree and combine the two. I know a lot of people don't get a chance to do that. And it was
Mhm.
it was just really serendipitous in some sense, but then I start to think back, and as I'm actually speaking to a couple people in the industry, and they said, no, it's not serendipity. It's that you always were meant to do this, and this was, preparation meeting opportunity, and
Mhm.
you're good at this. This is probably where you were meant to be. So
Mhm.
I find it to be a real blessing to be able to blend these two careers, and I don't actually think I would be as successful without the law degree. So it's a
Mhm.
blessing. It's actually a blessing. Like, I just got my press credentials reactivated because I'm going to sit in the Trump courtroom
Oh, wow.
um, going forward, starting
That should be fun.
tomorrow. So that will be interesting because I
Yeah.
started my career as a legal reporter, right? I started my career covering Trayvon Martin's murder. And so for me, I'm going right back to my roots. I'll be in the courtroom every day. And I think as lawyers, especially folks that have practiced litigation and criminal law in particular, have been defense attorneys in courtrooms, or prosecutors like myself, we see things that other people cannot see in a
Mhm.
courtroom. We know it inside and out. They say it takes 10,000 hours to become an expert at something, right? I'm an
Yeah.
expert in criminal trials at this point, and in
Mhm.
criminal law and constitutional law. So I'm really excited to have found the place of deep joy, and also deep need, and now purpose.
Well, that leads to my next question. You said a lot about criminal law and evidence. Were those your favorite law school classes, or did you have another
Oh,
favorite law school class?
yeah, criminal law was my favorite, along with evidence. I actually taught evidence at Pace Law School for a couple of years as well. I would say my favorite class, though, was trial advocacy. I was on the national trial team for Notre Dame. And so just I knew the minute I got onto the trial team that was where I was supposed to be. I wasn't supposed to be behind some desk
Mhm.
looking at contracts, and God bless
Mhm.
those that can do that. I have a
Right.
dear friend, Crystal, and she can mark up a contract like nobody's business. My eyes glaze over, right? And then she can close a real estate. I have another friend, Warren, who can close a real estate deal like nobody's business. That is an incredible gift. I do not have any of that. I am just good in the courtroom. I am good at reading a jury. I am good at speaking to people and speaking to juries. I'm a storyteller above
Mhm.
all else, and that's what good trial lawyers are. We're just storytellers, really.
Um, the statistic that people are so tired of me saying, but less than 5% of
Mhm.
attorneys here in the US are Black. That's
It's
the
true.
statistic that and actually it's even less than that now. I think the last time I checked it, maybe like 4.7, like it went down.
Mhm.
So you
Mhm.
have a lot of people not necessarily, just in general, across all races, people are just not going to law school anymore. Maybe they think it's too expensive. They can make money doing something else. So you don't have a
Mhm.
lot of people entering the profession. And that's part of the reason why we have the podcast. When you went to law school, was there ever like a defining moment where maybe you felt like, and I use the word discriminated kind of loosely, but in terms of like maybe you felt like if you were maybe white or male, you may have been treated a little differently.
I had a very special experience at Notre Dame Law School. And that is because we had the largest class of Black law students that the school had ever had.
Wow.
And so we were so supported. It was pretty ridiculous. Like, we
Oh,
had
wow.
each other. One of the guys that I graduated with, Floyd Ewing, we're still best friends. He was at my house last week, actually. Well, no, this past weekend for my daughter's 18th birthday. So I had a very cocooned experience. I felt protected. I felt covered. Um, and it was just a very special place. I know that is not the experience of a lot of other lawyers. I will say, once I graduated from law school, I then had the opportunity to clerk for the first Black judge to sit on all four benches, all the way to becoming the chief judge of the appellate court in Maryland, right? Chief Judge Robert Bell. So I was again cocooned and covered and protected and taught. And then when I got into a law firm, I will say it felt different.
Mhm.
um it felt really different. And I didn't feel as covered and protected. But then I had this blessing of a Notre Dame alumni who was the president of the Notre Dame Alumni Association, who scooped me up. His name was Jim Galeese. He's sadly passed, but Irish guy who just saw something in me. And so I've been very blessed to have champions in the rooms for me at all times. Like, Carla Harris, who's a friend of mine, always says that you every decision made about your career is made when you're not in the room. And you need a champion in the room that's willing to expend political capital on you. And I have had those people in the rooms for me. So I've been pretty fortunate, but that's not to say that I don't see the systemic discrimination and the systemic racism all around me, especially imagine being a lawyer at the Antitrust Division at the United States Department of Justice. I mean, I think I was one of two Black lawyers there, right? I was there, and I think Ali Ramadan was there, just two. I got to the U.S. Attorney's Office, very lucky, the first Black woman to lead a U.S. Attorney's Office. Wilma Lewis was the U.S. Attorney there. And she hired me. She sort of stole me from the Antitrust Division. I was covered there by her front office as well, a couple of women that are still my dear friends. But I saw that there were people that were treated differently. And once I got into television, it was a reality that I was treated very differently than other people. And to this day, there are other people that certainly have gotten opportunities that I have not received, and part of that is directly linked to my voice, my positions, and some of them are certainly because I'm a woman of color.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that storytelling, because that was one of my questions. Like, what was kind of that transferable skill set going from being more of a journalist, journalism, an undergrad degree going into law school? You talk about how storytelling was already your strength, and that's what made you an excellent attorney, especially a prosecutor. Is there anything about the law that, now that you're not obviously practicing full time, is there anything that you miss about it?
I miss it every day. I've kept all of my licenses current. TV is very fickle. You're in today and tomorrow you're out. And so
Yeah.
I have made sure to keep my finger on the pulse of what is going on. I've made sure to continue my CLEs. My friends like Ben Crump and Mark Garagos, they keep me right. They keep me ready. They send me articles. I miss practicing. I guess this is breaking news. I actually, for the contract that I just renewed here at ABC News, I asked for a carve out so that I could practice law. Of course, the answer was no. But my plan was actually to work with Ben Crump and to work with Mark Garagos in just even a small capacity, so that I could light that part of my brain that I miss so much. And to use my skills. I've written amicus briefs for the Supreme Court. I'm a member of the Supreme Court bar. I feel like there's so much work for me to do in that space, and this job doesn't really allow for it. And I understand it, because it is certainly a full-time job. But I miss it every single day. And most of my friends are lawyers, right? I mean, you become kind of a community, and people look at me like I'm crazy. Like, my husband actually even reminds me, he's like, you used to sleep on the floor of your office at the Department of Justice.
Yeah.
You were a crazy person. You were up all night preparing, direct examinations and cross examinations and writing poor thing, he had to hear opening statements and closing arguments over and over and over again. And he was like, you were like a lunatic. And I was, because that's just how I am. I'm like that now on the show. Like, I read every book, I watch every play, I look at I watch every movie. It's just my process. But gosh, I, 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 think being a lawyer is just one of the most honorable professions in the world. And I miss a lot of it. Being a legal journalist helps.
Mm-hmm.
Being in the courtroom going forward, watching
Mm-hmm.
the Trump trial is the first of his four trials is gonna be really helpful. I
Mm-hmm.
think for scratching that itch for me. I'm devastated that both of my children are not gonna be, well, neither of my children are gonna be lawyers. Um, but yeah, I miss it for sure.
Well, we will always welcome you back with welcome arms in terms of practicing whenever you're ready. I've actually had Ben Crump on. It took me 4 seasons to get him on. He's
Oh,
incredibly
he's great,
busy.
isn't he?
Yes, and I made him do like an extra long interview because he made me wait 4 seasons. But yeah, he's great, and I'm also a member of the Supreme Court bar. I think I did that during the pandemic a few years ago. I'm
Yeah,
like, I don't know
it's
what case I would
wonderful.
ever do, but like in the event, it's just nice to know that I'm a
It's
part of the
nice to
Supreme Court.
have, and it's actually
Yeah.
nice to work those muscles. I've argued appellate cases, of course, in DC, and it's a wonderful muscle to sort of stretch out, because and to exercise, because it's a very different muscle than being in a courtroom, right? It's
Mhm.
really different to argue on the appellate level, and especially if you get the opportunity to write an amicus brief. I've never argued in front of the Supreme Court, but if you get the opportunity to argue before the Supreme Court or the DC Circuit Court of Appeals or the DC Court of Appeals, I mean, you take it, you do it. It's a wonderful thing.
Mhm. Last two questions. What would be the advice you would give someone kind of pursuing, and I'm also going to listen to because I feel like I'm one of these people, but
Hmm.
that kind of have like this journalism, media interests, but you know, are being encouraged to go to law school and they're trying to, kind of finagle that path. Because I think for you, you just have such a beautiful story. I wouldn't even know that you did something for ABC long time ago, and now you're back at
Yeah.
ABC. I just think you have such a beautiful full circle story. So, but I'm sure going through the journey, you didn't know whatever X amount of years later you would be on The View, right? That wasn't
Right.
like you don't know it when you're going through the journey.
No.
So if someone is kind of going down a similar path that have both of these interests at the same time, what would be your best piece of advice for them?
Look, I actually think being a lawyer is really important, especially today. You mentioned the stats. Less than 5% of African Americans are lawyers, yet we are overrepresented in courtrooms, as defendants.
Hmm.
Um, so so having us in those rooms, um, and also in politics where policy is made, that's really important for us. So I would never discourage anyone from going to law school. I've been talking to my son; he wants to get his MBA. I'm like, MBA/JD, MBA/JD.
Yeah, we could do a
I
joint
think getting
degree.
that degree, I think getting that law degree, especially for people who are overrepresented in the criminal justice system in particular, is really important, right? Now, in terms of the journalism itch, I think that everyone has a story. I really think that, I've written a lot of books. My third one comes out May 28th. Well, that's my fourth book, but my third in a fictional series comes out May 28th. I think everyone has a story. And the best part of combining two types of careers is that you become different, you become an expert in an area that other people claim to be able to cover, but I will argue anyone down to the ground that a practicing lawyer in a courtroom can see things that a pure journalist cannot. Someone with just a journalism degree, they can't, or journalistic experience, they cannot do it the same way. I will argue anyone to the ground on that. So my advice would be, there really two things can be true at one time. You can
Mhm.
want to be a great lawyer and want to be a great journalist. I mean, if you look at when I started doing it, Court TV existed. It doesn't really exist in as much of a robust way as it did before. But you do have people like myself, Bakari Sellers. Um, you have Laura Coates, who was at the U.S. Attorney's Office with me in D.C. You have Laura Jarrett, who went to Harvard Law School, who called me when she wanted to get a job at CNN, and I walked her through what this career looks like. So I would tell people, you can do it. And it gives you a superpower that other journalists just don't have, quite frankly. And I also would say go for it, because there are too many people that kind of think, oh, there's not enough room for all of us. There's plenty of room. There are plenty of outlets now. Like, you can produce your own podcast now. You can have your own production company, which I have. You can, really create content in a way we didn't have when I was coming up. I had to go traditional linear if I wanted to be a broadcast journalist. I mean, if you look at Mehdi Hassan right now, he's on Zateo on YouTube doing some of the best journalism that there is out there right now. You look at Yashar Ali, some of the best journalists. He's breaking stories on social media. It's pretty incredible, I think. So there are so many more avenues open. I think people need to stop kind of looking at traditional linear media as the end all be all. This sort of like, oh, I want to be on The View. Okay, but there are only 5 seats on The View, really. There are only like 5
Right,
seats
there
on
are
The View.
only so
I've been
many
there 8
seats.
years. Unless you get fired, no one leaves.
Right.
And so you've got to kind of find your space and make it your own. And a really great way of doing that is having an expertise. It doesn't come easy. I mean, I get calls from a lot of young people or text messages and, people that I've mentored. And I think it looks really easy now. That's the other thing I would caution. You're like, I'm going to become an influencer. The problem with that is, like, it takes a lot of work to be influential. And you have to know kind of what you're talking about. So put in the work ahead of time, right? Get the degrees, go into courtrooms, even if you don't have a law degree, and get your 10,000 hours of expertise, and then create your own content. If you can't get a job in linear traditional media, which is, not doing as well as it used to do, and go for it. I'm a really big believer in going for it and dreaming as big as possible. I hate dream killers. And there are so many people out there that are like, you'll never get that job. I was told, I can't begin to tell you, I mean, I've been on The View for 8 years. This is my 8th season. I was told I would never be a national talk show host or a national host, that I didn't have the range. I didn't have the look. This was by a talent executive. Yes, I didn't have the look. I didn't have the range. That I was more of a sort of bit player, so to speak. And, I took that personally. And that same person, when I got the job on The View, decided to email me and claim that they saw it all along, which is not true.
Please.
It's clearly not true.
Right.
But I knew my dream. And so, when people, are telling you things like that, the dream just wasn't meant for them. They can't see it. That's fine. You dream your dream, but you have to make concrete steps towards it. It's almost like prayers without action, right? Like you gotta do something. But I think there's more opportunity out there than ever. You look at my friend Don Lemon, like he's doing some really big things. I'm going to be doing his show. I'm pretty impressed by Don and Mehdi and those people that are just out there creating their own way. It feels like back in the day when Barbara Walters was turned down time and time again for this concept she had about 5 women at a table 27 years ago, talking about things that were important in the world, and she was turned down. And look at us now.
And look at you now. Well, I would love to end the interview with you. You mentioned just briefly that you have a book speaking of creating. You do have a book coming out. Please tell us the name of the book, what it's about, when it's coming out, where can people find it, all that good stuff.
Yes, well, you can find it wherever books are sold. You can also go to my Instagram at Sunny, and I generally have links there for discounts and things like that. But it comes out May 28th, and it's the 3rd book in my trilogy, my summer series. The first book took place in Oak Bluffs. Second book, Sag Harbor. This book, May 28th, is Summer on Highland Beach. And I write historical fiction because I'm a history nerd, not only a legal nerd. And what I love about these these books is that they are based in history. You know, there's everybody knows HBCUs, right? Historically Black colleges and universities. What people don't know is that there is a federal designation, HBBC, Historically Black Beach Communities. And Black folks have been summering somewhere since the late 1800s. And Frederick Douglass's summer home is in Highland Beach, Maryland. It's the oldest HBBC in our country. And think about it. You know, you had Black folks that were really um, persecuted, right? There were no safe spaces. I don't even know if there are that many safe spaces today. Yet they were able to find community with each other, and they were able to carve out these spaces where they could commune and where they felt safe from the scourge of racism. And Highland Beach is one of those places. It's a wonderful place. It's a little hamlet not far from Annapolis, Maryland. And, you know, what's incredible is if you visit, I mean, there are no Airbnbs, no hotels, no, you know, restaurants. And so it really is just a community of folks. There's the house that Frederick Douglass actually summered in. You can go and visit his museum in his home. You can sit on the porch and look out across the bay where he had been enslaved. It is the most special place. But of course, my books are beach reads. I like to call them elevated beach reads. So it's like giving your kids vegetables with a little bit of honey and pine nuts on top. So I give you your history, but I also give you your drama and your messiness and relationships. And this book is very much so about Olivia, the protagonist, who needs to understand her family, biological family. She needs to understand where she came from so she understands where she's going. She sees a therapist because I want to destigmatize seeking therapy, and she sees a therapist, Dr. LaGrange. Shout out to all the therapists that helped me write this because I didn't know how to approach it, and also she finds her self-worth and her value, and people now, you know, and I hope the takeaway is that women, especially Black women, will know their worth, know and demand it, right? But it's a fun ride getting there. So again, it's sort of your veggies with a little, either a little hot sauce or a little honey.
Well, we look forward to it May 28th. Again, obviously you guys can your Instagram, is it what is your Instagram
At
handle?
Sunny.
At
It's
just
just
at
at
Sunny.
Sunny.
Just at Sunny. Very easy to find her. Obviously, her book will be available everywhere starting on May 28th. You know, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you coming and just, you know, just speaking a little bit about your journey. I always say I never know anybody's response, right? As much as I do these interviews,
Yeah.
I never know how someone's going to respond to my question. And so that's like the most exciting thing. I always learn something that like I didn't know before. And so thank you
Uh,
for being a part of the Black Lawyers podcast. We really appreciate it. And because you're a Black TV lawyer, we are going to be sending you some merch with your name
oh,
on
I
it.
like merch. I like gifts.
We're going to send you right now. So we have our fictional Black TV lawyers like Olivia Pope and Annalise and all that.
Yes.
But you are an actual real Black TV lawyer. So we will be sending you some merch for your office and for wear because we really do appreciate you coming on and supporting us. So definitely look out for that. And thank you again so much for joining us. Until next time, everyone, we're rooting for everyone Black. Take care. And then they're going to cut it there. So thank
Thank
you.
you.